Hey guys, today I'm here to talk about one of my Vim plugins called Vim Dotoo. It is basically a task manager and tracker. It's a play on the word to do, saying do to. I thought it was funny, but it's basically a plugin that is inspired by org mode, which is for those who don't know is a note taking application for Emacs. It is something that has been in existence for almost as long as Emacs itself, which is to say that it has a lot of effort and time and thought has gone into its design by a lot of developers, significantly more skilled than me. Uh, Whereas this is a plugin which tries to emulate some very specialized use cases or workflows, leveraging the org mode like document structure, right, keeping that in mind. And it's meant to be a very small subset and small set of use cases, mostly some that I had happened to come to like. One of the main things that I basically helped me sort of pick up org mode and use it actually as a task management tool was this document described by Mr. Bernd Hansen. He basically describes a workflow which was very similar. Like it had a lot of GTD like ideas, and there are a lot of aspects of this which I really liked. And I basically tried wholeheartedly to get a lot of these aspects into my plugin. One of the key things that I decided to do was build a document parser for the augmod document, or rather maybe a subset of the spec itself. It's not the complete. My parser is not 100% compatible with the augmod document spec, mostly because I was focused more on getting this workflow within Vim. And so let's look at maybe step by step. I'll go step by step. We'll look at the various aspects of a plugin, the kind of things that are supported, the kind of things that can be used to do some interesting things in order for you to manage and keep track of things that you want to do, as well as maybe how to manage keep track of the time that you're spending on tasks that you are doing, and how that is helpful. Okay, so right now I don't have any file, so I'm going to go ahead and create a to do file, right? And typically when you create a file, what you want to do is probably add some metadata to it. Right, it's useful that at a glance you will be able to look at this stuff and make some sense of it. Perhaps so now you know my email. Please don't spam me, please don't. So typically okay, let's I'll also maybe at the same time open the org manual, because some basic stuff it showcases it better, right? So as you can see, so this is basically what defines how an org mode document looks like. And some of the most basic things that you define within your document are headlines, right? And basically you can have a hierarchy of headlines. Headlines can have children, and then those can have further subtasks, sub children, and things like that. The levels of those headlines, you can think of them, for instance, like in HTML markup you have a concept of h1, h2, h3. To some extent you can relate to these headlines in that sense. And so typically the top level headlines are ones that are prepended with a single asterisk. However, the second level would be with a double asterisk, the third level will be with a triple asterisk, right? And so that way you can nest various levels of headlines. So now let's look at how headlines look at. So this is a headline, right? So this is a basic headline, and like I said, you can have nesting, and so this is a sub headline, right? And there are basically a bunch of it does have fairly decent syntax highlighting as well. One of the things that you might notice here, you're actually able to see only one of the asterisks. However, there are actually three asterisks over there. Just it's just that the syntax highlighting tries to, by default, it tries to highlight only the indented, the last asterisk. And this is a feature that exists in Emacs as well, and this is something that again can be configured. You could disable it if you wanted to, and actually see all the things as all the asterisks if you wanted to. Okay, now these are very basic headlines. While my plugin has no problem with such headlines, these aren't really tasks. They could be like notes or something else, but these are definitely not tasks. So we'll look at tasks right now. We'll look at tasks right away, right? And tasks typically are headlines which have some kind of a state metadata. So in this case, I say, this is a to-do headline, which means I can say this is a basic task, right? And the its status to do, which means it's something that you want to do sometime. Similarly, you could have another. You can basically create multiple tasks like these. However, these again are somewhat basic to dos. We are not saying when these tasks are due or when these tasks should be carried out. So these are just tasks to capture some thought, some ideas. So however, you can create tasks with schedules, right? And what that looks like is basically like this, right? So for the time being, let's say this is scheduled at 15:00 and let it be tomorrow, okay? And or let it be today, in fact. So this is a task with a schedule. Similarly, you can also have a task with a deadline, and that looks like this. Fairly similar. Let's say I want to complete by 8 instead now. By 6 p.m. Okay, and so the difference between this a scheduled task versus a deadline task is that a scheduled task, what we kind of tend to imply is that we are that's a task which we are meant to start working on the time that it is scheduled, right? So the idea is 3 p.m. I'm supposed to start working on it, right? However, when we say that a task has a deadline, what we mean is that that is basically when the task is due, as in we should be complete with it. We should be done with the task by that time. That's the general idea that we want to convey with this information. Now that we've defined a bunch of tasks, let's start looking at and let me get back to my plugins documentation. Let's start looking at one of the core features and one of the more important features of this plugin, which is basically agenda views. Now, a lot of the functionality that the plugin provides are available both within these two documents as well as within the agenda views. Now, when you are working on your projects on a day-to-day basis, typically what you want to do is look at your agenda buffers, the agenda views, and typically you should be able to perform any actions that you so desire from the views themselves. You wouldn't have to navigate to the actual files where your tasks exist and do some stuff there, right? And that way the entire process becomes really simple and easy, which means, like, let's say I'm doing anything, like I'm working on something, right? And I can always I can always just look at the agenda view and see, hey, what are my tasks? What am I supposed to work on? What are the things that I should be working on? What are the things that are urgent, are important? And you can even give priorities to these tasks, by the way. So I press tab. What that does is basically opens the file, and I didn't want that right now, but I accidentally pressed it. And so, like I said, so you can also give priorities to tasks, and that typically happens like this: a task with priority. So as you can see, it shows here, and it's highlighting. Okay, let me dial down a little bit. So what I'm doing is basically hitting the key G capital A, which is the default key to bring up your agenda menu. Now the agenda menu basically displays all the available agenda views that exist. Okay, the one we've been looking at so far is the agenda. Basically it gives you the daily agenda, and what stuff that is due, what stuff you should be working on, right? And there are a bunch of these other views, which, and we'll see them one by one. Okay, so coming back to the agenda view, as you can see here, right now basically this is displaying 3 tasks, right? And if you see them directly, right, so this is a task with the schedule, right? And if you reflect back on the to do file and it's open right above, right, you see that it is scheduled for today. And that's basically the reason why it's showing up here. It says, it is scheduled, and it is scheduled for today at 3 p.m, right? Similarly for the other one, and for the other one it says, that it's basically the deadline is at 6 p.m today, right? And so now typically the difference between tasks with a schedule and a deadline would become a little more apparent right now. Let's see. Let me create another to do with the schedule. And this time, let me say this is scheduled on, let's say this is like an early morning thing. It's scheduled on 28th of March, which is Sunday, right? Let's say this is when it's scheduled. And now let's go back to the agenda view, and as you can see, it's not actually showing you the task here at all, because it is scheduled for on 28th. Now if we were to navigate in the future to 28th March, which we can do using the F key, which F is for forward, B is for backward. So you can go F 27th March, F 28th March. You can see that the task now shows up on 28th and says it's scheduled for 9 a.m. Right? And so tasks that are scheduled, like I said, the definition is basically that you're meant to start working on them and at the date and time prescribed. So the agenda view shows you the scheduled tasks only on the day when they are actually scheduled. And coming back to today, however, the deadlines, what it does is, basically they are tasks that are due by that time, which means basically you can start working on them whenever. And typically in org mode, you can combine both a schedule and a deadline together to, have slightly more control over when the task starts and ends, or at least that's the plan that you have. However, Dotoo actually does not support that. Dotoo only supports either a schedule or a deadline, right? But like I said, so when it comes to tasks with a deadline, there is a configuration that controls, how many days further in the future should we look at for tasks that are due, and we show all of them. And it also obviously shows all the tasks that are due in the past as well, that automatically by definition they come in this same criteria. Why that is important is because, the tasks are due, you may say they are due, let's say tomorrow or day after tomorrow. However, the idea that we want to draw is that they're basically due by that time, which is which means typically you can start working on them whenever you want, and so be present to with all of those if you so choose, or you can start working on on one such task. So and as an example, let's take a task let's take another task with a a future deadline, right? So this is a task, let's say it's due tomorrow. Okay, in fact, no, let's say I want to say it's so this is another functionality that I have. And in fact, if you saw previously, I think I should have mentioned what I'm doing here is basically I have added support for incrementing and decrementing dates. This borrows functionality from plugins such as speed dating, right, which is a plugin by Mr. Tim Pope. But in essence, when you invoke this key binding control A or control X, A for increment and X for decrement, on a timestamp, it allows you to increase or decrease it by a day. However, you can instead, if you wanted, slightly more control over how to change or manipulate it, you can actually adjust the date by slightly more meaningful, in a more meaningful way, rather than just one day at a time. You can say, like, for example, let's say this task is due 2 weeks from today, or 2 weeks from that date. So 27 plus 2 weeks, it goes to the Saturday after that, right? And so basically you can see it's basically due on 4th of April, right? So now let's go back to the agenda view. As you can see, it is showing the task, which is, because it is still within the threshold of 30 days. It says, it's due in 15 days. If it's something that you can or want to start working on, you could do so right now, right? Now, the other thing to look at obviously is, the couple of tasks we defined initially, because they did not have any time metadata associated with them, they are not coming up here in this view. Now, so in order for us to look at those tasks, what you can do is you can instead use the separate agenda view called the to-dos view. And basically what that does is it shows you all the unscheduled to-dos, basically to-dos that do not have any time metadata, right? And potentially you could either add some time metadata, or you could, again, you can work with these tasks, take some action on them. Okay, so that's another agenda view that we've looked at. Now, the other very interesting thing, or rather a very important thing, before going into the other agenda views and other workflows and ideas, I think we're at a stage right now that we want to look at something, a better way of capturing tasks. Now, what we've been doing so far is that we literally are typing out the tasks. The better way of doing it is using the capture system. And the capture system is basically, it's a very simple system. It's basically a system that gives you a bunch of predefined templates. This is something that you can extend, right? There is ample documentation for it. There's configuration that allows you to extend this in ways that you can define your own custom templates, and they are then made available to you through the capture menu, which what we are looking at right now. So when you trigger the capture menu using the key binding G_C, and so it gives you basically the list of all the templates that exist. And so we look at the basic one, which is the to-do capture template. And as you can see, what it does is basically it pre-populates a new buffer with the template that is defined for a to-do headline. Let me cancel this first. I think I overlooked something very basic. So as you can see, so I was defining my tasks in this file, and when we went to the agenda view, it was actually able to show me the tasks that I defined in my file, and it was able to show them here. Now, how it does that is based on let me go to the configuration. Yeah, so this is the configuration. And so basically there are two configurations that we currently want to look at. So the number one is what defines is, a configuration that defines where to look for the agenda files. So right now I've configured it to be in Dotoo file /start.dotoo. This can have wildcards. This can also have like double star wildcards, which means any subdirectory as well. So this means that any Dotoo file which exists in the directory will be treated as an agenda file. So we load all of them and parse them and use that information to show in the agenda views. And then the next, when we were looking at the capture system, right? When we were looking at the capture system, the key there is the configuration Dotoo capture refile. And so now this defines the refile file where all the captured tasks go by default. Now again, for each individual template, you can override and define a specific target where that template must go once you save it. However, by default, if you don't specify that, by default they will always go into this refile file. So I'll create a refile Dotoo file and we'll add some basic metadata. Let's add a title. This is the refile file. I'll add a description to this, right? And this is the file where all captured tasks go. Tasks are saved by default. So let's look at now capture again. So hitting the capture menu, we see, let's look at the to do one. So you already seen this. So it basically populates the buffer with this template, and some key aspects of this. This is let me add some title. This is a captured. If only I could type captured headline, right? And so as you can see, it basically added a deadline, and it basically just picks up the current time when you invoke the capture. And typically you want to change this, or you could even remove it if you wanted to, right? I'm going to change this. I'm in fact going to, okay, let's say by 12 on, let's say this is Monday. And typically, and also the other thing, interesting thing that you might notice here is that basically the template also includes a logbook entry. The logbook entries can have a couple of different things. The one main thing we are looking at here is basically a clock entry. Now a clock entry is used to track time spent on a specific task, right? And so what we are seeing here right now indicates that we've started working on this task, which is basically the act of capturing itself, right? So, and it says that we started working on it at 0051, and when I actually finally when I'm done with my task, I finally save and close it. What happens is this task then gets added to the refile file. You saw that happen. What it did was it then closed that clock, and it adds the sort of the end time for it, and we're able to then do a diff and show you, okay, this is the time you spent on that task. And it says that we spent about 2 minutes for capturing this task, which is a bit high, but that's because I'm just doing a demo, right? And typically it's almost always zero, unless there's some other specific use cases where you want this to be representative of the time you spent on either, it could be a meeting, it could be something else, and we'll look at that. Okay, so now this is a task that we've captured, and we've also defined a deadline for it. Now let's go back to the agenda view. As you can see now, it actually shows you the task we just captured, and we said it's due on 29th, the Monday, which is in about 3 days and 18 hours, and it shows you that here. And it shows you also, it indicates that that this is a task that exists in the refile file. This could be any other agenda file also, for that matter, right? And this shows you that the remaining are in the to-do file. And now let's look at the filter mechanism that the views have. Now the basic, and if you open the fill and if you hit tab, basically it will show you all the options that are available for you. So you can search by either the file, the tags, to do, title, and content. Let's first look at the file. So I'm going to filter by file, and then it asks me which file do you want to filter for. And let's say I want to filter for the to do file, and there is completion here as well. So we say the to do file, and as you can see, it basically filtered, and it's now showing your tasks only for the to do file. This is very useful, right? And so now, because you want to focus on a specific set of tasks, like I said, right? So this allows you to do that. This allows you to focus on a specific context, and so you look at only the tasks within that context, and it helps you focus on what you really want to do. You can always reset the filters by just hitting / and enter. You can add, by the way, you can filter using the / key as is described here, and this is pretty useful. Right now we can search by we searched by file. we haven't added any tags yet, but we could, let's say, look at searching by title, and that's pretty straightforward as well. Let's say if I happen to search by in the word another. Now if I search by another, you'll see it basically only shows you this one task because it has the keyword another in the title. Similarly, you can also have other content in the headline. Sometimes you want a bullet list or you want some kind of other metadata, right? This is some description, and it need not have this hyphen. It's just this some description. It could be indented. Description that describes this headline in detail, right? Let's say we have this. Now when we go to the agenda view, what we could do is we can actually filter by content as well, which is the stuff that is within the headlines. And so let's search by description, and you'll see that we see basically only this headline because this has description in its content. The other thing to note is the fact that the filters are being displayed and mentioned in the header here. This is important because these filters are actually persist, in the sense that if you were to go to some other agenda view, the filters are actually carried in the basically the agenda views remember the filters, and this is very useful because you can filter by some specific context, right? And then you could switch between different agenda views looking for different kinds of things, and just basically focus on that. However, at any given time you can always reset the filters, and then you can get back to the state that was the default of the implementation. So now let's go to the refile view. I don't think we've seen that before. So when we go to the refile view, basically it is a view that shows you all tasks within your refile file. Now like I said, the whole idea of the capture system is that it allows you to capture tasks pretty quickly, right? You might just have a thought or an idea of something that you need to do, but obviously right now you're doing something else, so you cannot do. But for someone like me, someone very forgetful like me, what I want to do is right away just note down this task, file it away in the refile file, and later on at the end of the day or tomorrow, when I maybe have some free time, I can come back to the refile agenda view and see, okay, what were the tasks that I noted down previously, and then I could do something actionable on them at that point in time. And so we look at some actionable things that we can do now. Oh, okay, my reminder to drink water has come in, and this reminder also triggers my agenda, just so that I never miss the task. Water done. And close this. I go back to the refile view. And so like I said, there's a bunch of actions we can take from here, but the most common one, especially for the refile one, is to move the headline. So let's look at how to move the headline. All we have to do is hit the M key and then define. When you hit the M key, it basically asks you where do you want this task to go, and typically you could move this task to one of the agenda files, or you could even move this task to as a subtask for an existing headline within a file as well. Like for instance, when it says to do :name, basically what it's saying is, the to do file has these headlines, and if you wanted to move this task as a subtask of any one of those, you could choose one of those. Right now I don't want that. I'll just move it basically to the to do file. And quickly what you'll notice here, what happened was the task is no more available in the refile view. Since we had the refile open above, you also will notice that the task is no longer available here. Now when we navigate to the actual to do file, you'll see that the captured task is now available here. So it was moved from the refile file to the to-do file by just hitting a couple of keystrokes on your refile view, and that's one of the more powerful and amazing features. So that's what allows you to the ability to do all actionable stuff on these tasks very quickly, right from the agenda views, without having to actually navigate to the actual files where they exist. So that's how you move and capture. We also saw that the capture records the time that we spent on the task, right? And that's also useful. We can see later how we can actually utilize this information to generate a kind of a report which gives you more detailed breakdown of the time that you spent on tasks. Let's see a little bit more. Okay, we've captured this headline. Let me add a tag to it, and adding a tag is as simple as this. Basically just add some text within the colons, right? And when you do that, this is basically treated as a tag. So now if we were to go back to the agenda view, you will notice that this is getting wrapped here because this line is pretty huge. It's because I've zoomed in a bit. I think maybe this works out better, but at least it's definitely visible now, right? And so you can see basically it shows that this is a capture headline, and this is the tag associated with it. And why this is useful is, again, coming back to the filter mechanism that is in place. You can filter by tags, and so when you say filter by tags, and I can even hit the completion here, and obviously the only tag we have so far is capture, so it directly completes with capture. However, if you had more than one, it would show you them as options. So when I select the capture tag, and the sensible thing to do is to show only the tasks that have this capture tag. I'm going to reset this. Another thing to look at is you also have another view. I'm calling it as tagged view. What the tagged view does is basically it shows you all the headlines that have tags. One minor note about filtering, so that's something that it's worth noting, is the fact that when you do filter a view with a specific criteria, what essentially you are doing is you're only filtering the tasks within that view by that criteria, which is to say that, for instance, here we see that we have basically 5 tasks, and so when we filter by by some criteria, it's filtering from within these 5 tasks, and then it shows you a task if at all something exists that matches that criteria. However, if you wanted to search across all your tasks, and also, like I said, when you're doing the filtering here, we are filtering by some specific stuff, like we are filtering by the title, the tags, or the file, and the content, right? Or the to-do state. You're filtering by some specific criteria, whereas if you were to do this from the search view, it actually looks for whatever search term you provide in all of those. Let's search by deadline right now. Okay, so when I search by deadline, it's basically showing you all tasks that have this search parameters somewhere in the headline. It could be in the content, it could be in the title, it could be the to-do state, it could be the file name, bunch of these kind of things, right? And it's so this looks for tasks across all the tasks that you have. And then in the end we have a notes view. Notes view is pretty straightforward. So before we go to the notes view, let's go back to the capture menu. And as you can see here, right now we've only looked at the to-do capture template, and we'll get into a few of the other templates a little later. However, since we were talking about notes, let's look at the note view. So let's capture a note, and I'll say a headline with a tag note. Let me save it. As you can see, it quickly saves the note in the refile file. Now let's look at the notes view, and all it does is basically shows you all the headlines that have the tag note, right? And as simple as that. And so and all and it shows you, where the task is defined and all those things. So this is a task with a deadline, and we say that it is, oops, sorry, I went back in time. So this says that this task is due by 6 p.m. today. Now obviously what you want to do is work on those tasks, and once you're done with them, right, what you can do, or even there are some other intermediary states as well that you can do this. So on the agenda view, what you can do is you can hit this or hit the C key, and what that does is it basically gives you a another change state menu, which says, you want to change the state of that task, and it asks you, these are the states that exist in the system: to do, next, waiting, hold, phone, meeting, cancel, and done. Now obviously there is a bit of configuration that controls these states and also defines some dependencies between them. Most importantly, it also defines, and distinguishes between active states and completion states, right? So the cancel and the done are considered as completion states. Those essentially are the end state of any task. You and the remaining are active states, where you still are either going to at some point in time work on them, right? So let me say that, I'm done with this task. So I'm going to hit D to say that I'm done. So when you say that, you'll see that the task disappeared from here, right? And you'll see that the task was marked as done, and it also was basically we removed or stripped away the deadline within the task, and we switched that with a closed metadata, and it says, that the task is closed, and we provide the date and time when it was closed. So this is how basically you would say that I'm done with something. Now the other interesting thing to look at is, now that we did this change, maybe let's assume that maybe I either misunderstood the task or whatever, right? And I accidentally marked it as done. However, that was not my intent. Since I just did it, what I could do is I could simply just undo that. And what that does, as you can see, is it basically it went ahead and applied undo on the file where the task exists, and so it went back to the to do state. This is not a persistent change. As you can see, the file is now shown as that it has changes, which means, this change was made but not persisted. Now I can hit S key to save all of the files, and now it is persisted again. However, intentionally it is, it isn't persisted. Now let me mark this as done again back. Now let's look at the ability to capture the time spent on task in slightly more detail, and how that works with Dotoo is basically you can clock in for a task, and then you can clock out for a task. Clock in signifies that you've started working on it, and when you clock out, it signifies that that you are currently done working on it. Whether you're done or not, obviously still is controlled by when you change the state to done. However, the idea is, and in reality this happens almost every time, that you may start working on something, and then you have to switch to something else. So you stop, you clock out of the task, and then you do something else, and then you come back, and then you want to start working on it again, so you clock in again. And so typically you can do this activity, clock in, clock out, clock in, clock out, clock in, clock out, many times, and eventually all of this time would add up to something. And when you look at your log summary, which I'll showcase in a little bit, you'd then be able to get a better picture and some sense of how much time did you actually spend on it. Now, like I said, both clock in, clock out, and all these activities can be done from within the file or the agenda views. My preference is to always try to do everything from within the agenda views. Let's go to the agenda view, and let's say I want to start working on this captured headline. So I will clock in the task, which happens when you press the I key, right? I say I, and as you can see here, Yeah, the captured headlines to do state had changed to next. And so there is a behavior from kind of specific reason. So because I've started working on it, I move it to the next state, representing a task that is basically, something that I'm working on next. Now I can clock out on this task, which is done using the O for the headline and the cursor. So I just say O, and you'll notice that this added an entry, a new entry, saying, I spent so and so time on this task, and I can do this multiple times. And let's go back to the agenda view. And so now that we've done this a number of times, let's look at the log summary. Like I said, you can clock time you spent on your tasks, and then you can look at the log summary, and then log summary gives you a very detailed breakdown of the time that you've spent on tasks. It divides them. Obviously you see a grand total of how much time you spent. However, you also see total per each file, and then you see, okay, for each headline how much time you spent. Okay, so it tries to do that. Another one minor interesting thing with the capture thing is, as you can see, there is a capture template called meeting, and that's something that I use fairly frequently. In it, I mean, at the end of the day, it's obviously just a basic um, template with a meeting which has a meeting as its to-do state, and it has a tag meeting. And why this is nice is because what I typically do is I start the meeting capture, and then I go into the meeting, and and let's say I'm meeting my YouTube audience. Let's say I am right. Now when I'm in a meeting, this capture task is going on. Now what you could do, obviously, you could take notes on the meeting. You could take note down stuff that is discussed during the meeting. The main point of highlight over here is the fact that you understand that, when you start the capture mode, it starts clocking this task. And so as long as you keep the capture window open, this task is kind of still clocking time. And so once you're done with your meeting, at the end, finally, when you're done recording all whatever relevant information for that meeting, then finally you can end and close this meeting. And then this will obviously by go into the refile file, and when you go to the refile file, you'll see that the meeting was captured here, and also that the meeting, it took a minute for us right now because this is a demo. But if you spend half an hour or an hour in a meeting, this helps you look at it. And why this is important is because when you go on your agenda view and you look at the log summary, it'll also show you this as a separate entry here. And it'll also be able to help you make sense of where are you spending your time. Are you spending more time in meetings, or are you spending more time actually doing stuff? Typically you spend more time in meetings because that's the way things are nowadays. Okay, so that's that. I know that's a lot to take in, but there's still a lot more. Now let's come back to the to-do view, I guess, the to-do file, I mean. Now we've looked at some interesting stuff, but we haven't looked at some really awesome stuff. Now we're going to look at some really awesome stuff, so brace yourself. When we capture tasks, a lot of the times there are certain tasks which are repetitive in nature, in the sense that you want to do them regularly, right? There could be some bookkeeping tasks. There could be some basic mundane tasks like paying bills and things like that, right? Now Vim Dotoo allows you to represent such tasks which are repetitive in nature, and have some kind of a repetitive schedule, or a repetitive deadline. And we'll look at that now. So this is a task with a repetitive schedule now, right? And so let's say I will mark this to started at 26th by noon, and then I'll say I want to do this task every 2 weeks. Okay, so this defines that this the repetition frequency or the period of when this task repeats. So now when I save this task and it goes in the refile file, now when I save this task and now when I go back to the agenda view, let me close the log summary. But it's good to note and see, as I'm working on stuff, it keeps get adding here, and you can actually see and visualize, where did you actually spend your time. Oops, sorry, I didn't want to close the agenda view. I wanted to close the log summary. And now, as you can see, it shows you that this is a task with a repetitive schedule, and it shows you that it's scheduled at 12. Now this looks and this has a deadline, by the way. Yeah, I wanted to show you the scheduled one. Let's look at the scheduled one. Let us say, yeah, right. Now the difference between the scheduled and deadline again is the same as we saw earlier, right? Basically the scheduled one signifies that the task is meant to start at that time, which is to say that if I were to, for instance, let's say I were to increase this by one. Let's say I want to start this on Saturday, and I go back to my agenda view. It will no longer show up here. You'll have to go to the next day, and then it will show up and say, hey, this is where this is when you want to start working on this task. Now, however, this task is something is special for us, right? We say that we want to work on this every 2 weeks, and I think it will work best for us if we switch our agenda view to look at the entire month. Now, as you might have seen previously, the agenda view says here, that the span that we're looking at right now is that of a day. Now this is something we can change. We can look at either a week, or we could look at the entire month. Let's switch to a month. Now that does make it a little bit long. However, we should be able to manage working with that. Let me do a bunch of things. Let me resize. This is good, right? So as you can see, now it's says this was one with the repetitive schedule on Saturday. So 27th March, you see that this is the first. This is the task with the repetitive schedule, right? And you see that it's scheduled on 27th March. Now, and it was a Saturday. Remember that it was a Saturday. Now when we go to the next month, now when you go press F, it actually takes you to the next month rather than the next date, because we're in the month span mode. Now you will see that the next Saturday, 2 weeks from it, it's not the next Saturday, it's the next Saturday is 3rd of April, and then the next to next is 10th of April. And this shows you that this is the task with the repetitive schedule. Again, it's scheduled, oops, sorry, let me go back. It's scheduled at 12 noon, and then again similarly 17th April is skipped, and then 24th April, again the 2 weeks from then is the next time when this is scheduled. And if you go forward in time, you will see that it repeats every 2 weeks. Now you can press the dot key to come back to the today's date, and so we are looking at the month for today's, or the current month rather. Yeah. And so this is this is something really useful. And similarly, let's look at now this is a task with a repetitive deadline, and let's say it starts today, and let's say I want to finish this thing, and let's say I want to do this every 3 months now. So the previous one we did was every 2 weeks. This, however, instead is every 3 months, so essentially once in a quarter. Let me save this. It goes in the refile file. Let's look at the agenda view. Let me push this to make a little bit more sense. Let me say 10. Yeah, another 10. Okay, so our task is starting today. So when you look at the today's this thing, it shows the task with the repetitive deadline. Yeah, there's no typo. Is scheduled for today. It's in the refile file. It's at 6 p.m. and because we said this is the task that is scheduled that repeats every 3 months. Now when we go to the next month, The repetitive deadline task doesn't show here. We'll go to the next month again, the month after that, that still doesn't show. Now we are now in 3 months after that, and here you will see the first time on 26th June. So 26th March, 3 months from then is 26th June. That's when the task is due next. And if you were to go forward again 3 months, you will see on 26th September the same task is due again, right? So in theory the schedule and the deadline task, they work similarly. The minor difference is in what meaning they sort of represent in terms of the fact that they're scheduled or due by that time. So now let's look at another thing. Now we've seen that there's the task with the repetitive schedule, and then this is the task with the repetitive schedule, right? So what happens when you mark a task with a repetitive schedule as done? Now let's look at that. Now I'll mark this as done. So select the to-do state, I'll hit D to mark this as done. You'll see that it disappeared from the current month, right? However, you'll also notice that the task with the repetitive schedule, what got added to it was a bunch of things. The main of which was the fact that there's an entry here saying that the state was changed to done from to-do state, right? Essentially signifying that we marked the task as done. It also captures the time when it was done, and then it also notes what was the last date when this task was due, the last date when it was due, and then it moved the scheduled time to the next repetition when it was going to repeat next. And so when we go, so it says 10th April, right? So when we go to the next month, we'll see that on 10th April it is scheduled again. Now if you were to mark this as done again, let's try doing that. We will mark this as done again. Now you'll see that it disappeared from 10th April. However, you can still see on 24th April, and when you look at the task log, you see it was marked done from to do again, even though we did it from the same date. But and it's a little bit of cheating here, I would say, I guess, but it basically moves this task to the even further, the next to next iteration of when it is scheduled to start. Now we look at the task with the repetitive deadline. Again, it works pretty much the same way. If we were to mark it as done, it is no longer shown here, and the log indicates that it was marked as done. And then when you go forward 3 months, now you see that the task with repetitive deadline is shown here. The other minor thing to see is the capture menu. We also have a template for a habit. Now a habit is very similar to what we already saw, basically a repetitive task with a specific schedule, right? A habit is very similar to that, except with some minor changes, right? One of them being the fact that we want to retain and keep it in the next state, so it is always ready to pick up. And then there is a special metadata which indicates that it is a habit, and then we say, okay, the repeat to state, which is to say the next state when we mark it as done, should again be next and not to do. And the remaining remains pretty much the same. This is a habit, right? And everything is going in the refile file, right? And right now I'm not going to bother moving it, but you get the idea. Let's go to the agenda view, and let's switch back to the day view, and let's go to the today's date. And now we'll look at the log summary again. I mean, I just wanted to showcase, like as we are working on tasks, the log summary is going to evolve and show you more information here and more representative of the stuff that you've been doing. I've worked 7 minutes today. That's a lot for me. Yeah. If you're in any of the agenda views, rather, right now we're in the agenda view. You can actually from here navigate directly to the headline, to the file which contains the headline. So for instance, if I were to hit enter, it actually navigates and just opens the file and positions your cursor to where the headline is. Or you want to validate or verify whether the agenda view did do what you told it to do. Sometimes it may not like you. And similarly, there are a bunch of other things that other minor stuff, like you can hit Control S, which is that it opens it in a split. You can hit Control V, which opens in a vertical split, and there's also Tab, which does the same thing as a vertical split. And these are meant for the rare occasion when you actually want to go to the file and not do everything from the agenda view itself. I think that's going to be it. This is obviously a long video. I'll try to edit it and try to make it as short as possible, which means I'm probably going to remove this. Yeah, I am. Yeah, that'll be all. Thank you guys. Thank you for your time. Please do like this video, share it, subscribe, and please do comment. Please share your thoughts and help me, or just critique. You may absolutely hate this. Why not? And do share your thoughts. Thank you so much.